All right, Tuesday, the leaked tapes are out and they change everything we thought we knew about what was happening inside the DOJ before Pam Bondi got fired. 1 year, 14 months, 0 major convictions. According to sources familiar with the internal conflict, Blanche and Bondi were at war long before Trump pulled the trigger on April 2nd. I've been going through the reporting, the sourced accounts, and the documented record. Here's what I found. Quick context. Pam Bondi, former Attorney General, 14 months in office, fired April 2nd, 2026. Todd Blanche, former Trump defense attorney, now acting Attorney General, and by all documented accounts, the man who quietly outlasted her. The issue. While Bondi was publicly defending the Epstein file rollout and getting destroyed for it, internal DOJ sources confirm Blanche was simultaneously maneuvering to take over, pushing cases Bondi had stalled, and signaling loyalty to Trump that Bondi could not match. Timeline, fast version. 14 months ago, Bondi confirmed as Attorney General, pledges she won't let politics drive decisions. Reversed within weeks. Months ago, internal tensions build. Blanche urges Bondi not to fire more DOJ employees. Bondi ignores him, keeps cutting. April 2nd, Trump fires Bondi. Blanche steps in as acting AG the same day. 5 days later, Blanche launches the National Fraud Enforcement Division. Bondi hadn't done it in 14 months. That's the setup. Now the documents. Okay. The evidence. First account, sourced reporting from the New York Times, confirmed by multiple outlets. Blanche told Trump directly that key U.S. attorney offices, specifically the Eastern District of New York, were too important to hand to unqualified loyalists. Quoting from documented sourcing, Blanche told Trump the EDNY covered JFK Airport, the largest air passenger gateway into North America, and that he should rely on veteran prosecutors. That's not my analysis. That's a documented internal position Blanche took while Bondi was still in office. What it means? Blanche was actively managing Trump's expectations around personnel, going around Bondi while serving as her deputy. That is not a deputy supporting his boss. That is a deputy building his own relationship with the principal. But here's what got me. The Comey seashells case. Bondi had been working the false statements angle. The Virginia case. She concluded that was the stronger charge. The threat case, based on a beach photo, had been put on indefinite hold months after May 2025. Then Bondi got fired. Within days, Blanche's aides instructed prosecutors to seek a grand jury indictment on the exact case Bondi had deprioritized. The Eastern District of North Carolina, April 28th, indictment obtained. Put those two together. Bondi deprioritized the seashells case. Blanche took over. The seashells case got indicted in 11 days. I went through the sourced reporting 3 times. Pattern is undeniable. Cases Bondi stalled. Blanche accelerated within days of taking over. Personnel decisions Bondi made. Blanche had privately opposed and told Trump otherwise. Epstein messaging. Bondi owned publicly. Blanche immediately distanced from on day 1. All documented. Multiple sourced news organizations. Check it yourself now. What nobody is actually connecting. Acting Attorney General Blanche told Fox News on the night Bondi was fired, quote, "The Epstein file should not be a part of anything going forward." 14 months, Bondi destroyed over Epstein. Blanche walks in and buries it in his first public interview. Read that again. That's not grief. That's a man who watched his predecessor burn and made sure he had a fire extinguisher ready before she finished burning. Fallout within 72 hours of Blanche taking over. National Fraud Enforcement Division launched. Comey seashells indictment pushed to grand jury. Public messaging on Epstein completely reversed. All within 1 week of Bondi's exit. Subscribe. Stories developing, and I'm not done. Okay, but look, gotta be fair here. The other side has real points. Several of them, and some are genuinely strong arguments, not just spin. Blanche's defenders, and there are serious ones, say this is a fundamental misread of how the DOJ actually functions. Their argument: a deputy attorney general managing upward, giving the president context on personnel decisions, and accelerating cases when given more authority is not betrayal. That is how effective governance inside a large law enforcement agency works. Former DOJ Chief of Staff and Institutional Operations Specialist James Cuthbert put the general principle this way: a deputy who has the president's ear on operational details is doing his job. That's the role. And honestly, some of that holds up. Blanche's argument on the evening was factually correct. JFK is the largest air passenger gateway into North America. Having veteran prosecutors there isn't loyalty, it's operational sense. You can disagree with his politics and still acknowledge the argument was substantively sound. On the Comey case, a DOJ spokesperson stated on the record that the investigation had been ongoing for a year and that charges were filed when prosecutors believed the evidence supported them. Bondi's team says she didn't slow walk it. The timeline happened to align with Blanche's arrival. Former federal prosecutor and DOJ veteran Sandra Richfield acknowledged the broader principle. Prosecutorial timing decisions are almost never as simple as they look from outside. Cases mature, evidence develops. New leadership reviewing files fresh can move faster without prejudging. Don't agree with all of it, but that's a legitimate institutional argument, not nothing. What the other side genuinely has: no direct evidence Blanche sabotaged Bondi rather than simply replacing her effectively. The Comey case had documented institutional history. It wasn't invented after April 2nd. Even former Trump White House counsel Ty Cobb noted in separate commentary around this period: personnel transitions at DOJ always produce acceleration in some areas and deceleration in others. That's structural, not necessarily conspiratorial. Look, I'm not here to declare Blanche guilty of engineering Bondi's fall. The timeline of his rapid moves after she left could be a man finally free to act without institutional friction. Or it could be a man who had been quietly positioning for months. Both interpretations have documented evidence. That is exactly what makes this story significant. What the documents clearly show: Blanche and Bondi disagreed on personnel, disagreed on prosecutorial pace, and disagreed on Epstein messaging, all while Blanche was technically her deputy. That tension is documented. What caused Bondi's firing is the open question. This did not come out of nowhere. Backstory. Quick. Long before Bondi was fired, the Epstein file rollout had become a documented disaster inside the administration. Bondi suggested on Fox News in February that a client list was sitting on her desk. The purported document never materialized. She later told reporters she meant Epstein-related files more generally. Weeks after that walkback, 15 right-wing social media influencers were brought to the White House and handed binders labeled the Epstein Files, Phase 1. That was the rollout. Influencers, binders, no client list. Weeks after that, Bondi's closed-door briefing with House oversight went off the rails. Democrats walked out within 30 minutes. Someone said on the record during Bondi's February Judiciary Committee hearing, constitutional law professor and ranking Democrat Jamie Raskin, quote, "You washed up loser lawyer." That was Bondi's response to Raskin, on the record, in a congressional hearing. That is the person managing the most politically sensitive files in the country. Pattern: client list promised, never delivered. Influencer briefing instead of legal release, walked back immediately. Congressional hearing turned into a shouting match. Every time, a new embarrassment, a new cleanup. The White House grew frustrated. Blanche was handed the public messaging role, while Bondi was still Attorney General. That is documented. Until April 2nd. Like if it makes sense so far. Saturday, March 28th, a White House meeting. Bondi and Blanche both present. Sources confirm the atmosphere had shifted. By that week, the White House had temporarily told Bondi she could not appear on Fox News for interviews. Blanche was handling public messaging and communication with Congress about the Epstein records. Bondi was still technically the Attorney General. Blanche was doing her public job. Quote from documented sourcing on the internal dynamic. The White House grew frustrated with Bondi's inability to quiet the public outcry. Room read, not good for Bondi. What followed in documented sequence? Bondi continued attending official events through early April, including sitting next to Trump at Supreme Court oral arguments on birthright citizenship on April 1st. By mid-Thursday, April 3rd, news of her ouster had leaked to the press while she was already in Florida for a pre-scheduled meeting with local sheriffs. Blanche was named acting attorney general the same day the firing became public. 3 days, that fast. Now, what everyone missed while focusing on Bondi's exit. While every outlet covered Bondi's firing, Blanche had already been effectively running significant pieces of the department's external communications for weeks before April 2nd. Then on April 7th, Blanche held his first press conference as acting AG. He was asked whether he wanted to be nominated permanently. His answer? I love working for President Trump. It's the greatest honor of a lifetime. If he chooses to nominate somebody else and asks me to go do something else, I will say, thank you very much. I love you, sir. That's not a caretaker. That is an audition on live television. White House response? Silence, which in this administration is the loudest possible signal. Wasn't reactive, calculated. You can see it in the timeline. Blanche launched a new division in 5 days, reversed Epstein messaging in 1 interview, and indicted Comey in 11 days. That's not a man who just arrived. That's a man who had the plan ready. This is where it gets genuinely significant. Don't go anywhere. What I show you next changes the picture. What are legal and institutional experts saying about all of this? Former DOJ Deputy Chief of Staff and Federal Institutional Analyst, 16 years experience spanning 3 administrations. When a deputy attorney general is handling the principal's media role and congressional communications while the AG is still in office, that is a documented transfer of functional authority. The title catches up to the reality eventually. Plain English translation, Blanche wasn't just waiting in line. He was already doing the job before Bondi was fired. The April 2nd announcement formalized something that had already effectively happened. Former federal prosecutor who served in the DOJ's public integrity section for 11 years. The Comey case acceleration after Blanche took over is either a remarkable coincidence of timing or evidence that prosecutorial prioritization had already shifted at the deputy level before the AG change. Key point there, federal prosecutors don't suddenly produce grand jury indictments in 11 days on cases that were cold. Cases get warm before indictments happen. The warming of the Comey case happened while Bondi was still technically in charge. Here's what is genuinely telling about the expert read on this. Even a former Republican DOJ official who worked closely with multiple AGs acknowledged publicly, there are documented cases where a deputy AG's relationship with the White House was closer than the AG's. That creates institutional tension that eventually resolves one way or the other. When people who have worked inside the institution describe the dynamic as structurally inevitable rather than surprising, pay attention. Professional consensus across institutional and legal analysts. Blanche's rapid moves in the first 11 days of his tenure reflect preparation, not improvisation. That level of speed requires pre-existing plans. The documented disagreements between Blanche and Bondi on personnel and prosecutorial pace represent a genuine internal conflict, not normal deputy deference. The Epstein pivot, burying it in the first Fox News interview, signals Blanche had already assessed the file as a political liability and decided to neutralize it immediately. That's where serious institutional analysts are landing on this story. Useful breakdown? Hit like. Why should you care about any of this? Real talk. If you pay federal taxes and you assume the Department of Justice operates on the basis of law rather than internal political positioning, this story connects directly to you. Here is the documented reality. While Bondi was publicly defending the Epstein file rollout and getting destroyed politically, Blanche was quietly managing Trump's personnel decisions on U.S. attorney offices, publicly messaging on Epstein instead of her, and building a direct line to the White House that her boss didn't have. The title said deputy. The function said something else. Numbers that are documented: 14 months, 0 major convictions against Trump's stated political targets, 11 days under Blanche before the Comey indictment, 5 days before the National Fraud Enforcement Division launched. Your direct stake. Every federal prosecution that affects any American, from financial fraud to civil rights cases to the SPLC indictment Blanche announced the same week, runs through the DOJ. Who runs that department, how they got there, and whose priorities they are actually serving determines which cases get prosecuted and which cases get buried. That is not abstract. That is the legal operating system of the country you live in. This sets a documented precedent. If a deputy attorney general can effectively take over the public-facing functions of the department while the AG is still in office, managing media, managing Congress, managing the president's expectations, what is the actual authority of the confirmed AG? What does Senate confirmation mean if the functional transfer of power can happen before the formal one? Quick example connecting this to real people. You are a federal whistleblower with a case pending at the DOJ. Your case was assigned under one set of prosecutorial priorities. The AG gets fired. The deputy takes over. In 11 days, the entire prosecutorial priority list has reorganized. Your case, which was moving, is now cold. A case that was cold is now moving. You did nothing wrong. The institution changed around you. That is not a hypothetical. That is the documented experience of multiple ongoing DOJ matters during this transition period. Who is directly affected right now? Every defendant or complainant in a federal case whose prosecutorial status changed in the 11 days after April 2nd without any change in the underlying facts of their case. Every Senate-confirmed position that carries legal authority premised on the assumption that the confirmed official is actually exercising that authority and not having it exercised around them. Every American who assumes that the publicly stated reason for a prosecution or a non-prosecution reflects the actual institutional reasoning behind that decision. Uncomfortable truth the documented record makes unavoidable. Bondi was the confirmed Attorney General. She pledged in her Senate confirmation hearings that she would not make decisions based on politics. Within weeks, she was purging career prosecutors. Within months, she was losing congressional hearings in real time. Within 14 months, she was fired. The man who replaced her had been doing pieces of her job before she left. That is the documented sequence. What informed people are specifically tracking right now. What Blanche says about Bondi's handling of the Epstein files when he's asked, and notably, what he declines to say, given that his first public statement was that the files should not be a part of anything going forward. The Comey seashells case outcome, because it was indicted on a legal theory that multiple former prosecutors on record have called the dumbest case in the history of the Department of Justice, and Blanche's credibility as acting AG is now attached to it. Whether Blanche receives a permanent nomination, because everything he has done since April 2nd reads as a sustained audition for the job he said he'd love to have. Knowledge helps. How did the key players respond publicly to the transition? Made it complicated at almost every turn. Bondi posted on X after being fired, she is moving to an important private sector role she is thrilled about. No mention of the Epstein files. No mention of the congressional subpoena she still has to answer. No mention of Blanche. Quote from her X post, "Moving to an important private sector role I am thrilled about." Reaction to that statement? Congressional investigators noted the subpoena remains legally binding despite her departure from office. The DOJ issued statements about Epstein that directly contradicted the posture Bondi had maintained publicly for 14 months. Blanche came back on Fox News the same night Bondi was fired. The Epstein files should not be a part of anything going forward. Then within days, launched the National Fraud Enforcement Division, announced investigation into the SPLC, pushed the Comey indictment, announced potential subpoenas to reporters covering classified leaks. Not cooling down, the opposite. Blanche came in moving at a pace Bondi never matched in 14 months and has not slowed down since. What remains genuinely unclear going forward: 1. Whether the documented internal conflict between Blanche and Bondi over personnel, prosecutorial pace, and Epstein messaging constitutes coordinated positioning on Blanche's part, or simply reflects two different institutional philosophies that were always going to collide inside the same department. 2. What Pam Bondi says on May 29th before the House Oversight Committee, specifically whether she addresses the internal DOJ dynamic with Blanche in the period before her firing, and whether those answers conflict with what Blanche has said publicly about the transition. Coming confirmed events. House Oversight Committee transcribed interview with Pam Bondi, May 29th, officially confirmed, not under oath. Comey seashells trial, date pending. Legal challenges to the interim U.S. Attorney's appointment already filed. Blanche confirmation hearing if nominated. No date set, but his public positioning makes clear he is pursuing it. Date to watch above all others, May 29th. Bondi on record. Blanche already having publicly buried the Epstein files. The two versions of what happened inside the DOJ will have to be reconciled in that room. Subscribe. I will break down the full testimony the moment it concludes, where things stand as of Tuesday, May 5th, 2026. Todd Blanche, acting AG since April 2nd, 11-day indictment pace, openly auditioning for permanent nomination. Pam Bondi, fired, subpoenaed, transcribed interview confirmed May 29th, not under oath. Comey seashells indictment obtained April 28th, legal challenges pending on interim U.S. Attorney appointment. Epstein files, Blanche publicly buried them on day one. DOJ IG investigation still active. Scheduled May 29th. Bondi transcribed interview. House Oversight Committee ongoing. DOJ Inspector General Epstein compliance investigation. No public deadline. Pending. Blanche permanent nomination. No date announced. Not public yet. What specifically was said in internal DOJ communications between Blanche and Bondi in the weeks before her firing, and whether those communications will surface through the congressional process on May 29th. Clock is running toward that date. That's where we are. Todd Blanche walked into the acting AG role on April 2nd with a plan that was clearly already written. Pam Bondi walked out, having spent 14 months as the public face of a department whose internal functioning had been shifting underneath her. Surface read, a personnel change at the top of the Justice Department following underperformance on key administration priorities. But Blanche was doing her public job before she was fired. The cases she deprioritized got indicted within 11 days of her exit. The messaging she had defended for 14 months was reversed in his first Fox News interview. I will be watching specifically what Bondi says on May 29th about the internal DOJ dynamic in the weeks before April 2nd. That is the testimony that has not happened yet. That is the account that could reframe everything that has been publicly reported about why she was fired and what Blanche knew before he stepped in. Story is not over. Still developing in real time. Subscribe for the full picture, not just the headline version. When documents drop, I will break them down completely. Talk soon.